Wealth is meant to buy protection. Engineers, safeguards, and systems designed to stop things from going wrong. But in this episode, money becomes the problem. These are the 5 dumb moments when rich people ignored standards, brushed off warnings, and died trusting their own judgment over reality. It was August 17, 2014, on a private game estate in Limpopo Province, South Africa. The land was large, fenced, and privately owned. It was not run as a conservation project. It existed mainly as a display of wealth and control. Marcus Leroux was 46 years old. He made his money as a mining logistics consultant, arranging the transport of heavy machinery across southern Africa. The work paid well and kept him out of the public eye. Privately, he wanted something visible to display his success. The estate was meant to be that symbol. Against repeated advice, Leroux kept a hand-raised adult male lion on the property. The lion was named Tariq. Leroux believed raising the animal from a cub made it safe. Staff disagreed. Several handlers quit over time, later citing safety concerns. Leroux dismissed them as overly cautious and unsuited to the kind of display he wanted. He believed distance looked weak and undermined the image he wanted. As months passed, his behavior became riskier. He entered the enclosure alone. He stopped carrying a radio. He ignored feeding schedules, saying unpredictability kept the animal under control. Secondary fencing was removed so the photos would look cleaner, despite warnings that it served no operational purpose other than safety. Security cameras showed changes in the lion's behavior in the weeks before the incident. Long staring, slow approaches, hesitation that ended closer each time. On the morning of August 17th, Leroux entered the enclosure carrying raw meat in his hands instead of using the feeding chute that had been installed specifically to eliminate the need for direct contact. Security footage showed the lion reacting immediately, but not with panic or noise. Adult male lions do not rush into unfamiliar situations. They assess. Tariq lowered his body close to the ground, reduced his profile, and began a slow, deliberate approach. His ears were forward, his tail low and still, signs of focused attention, not agitation. Leroux mistook the absence of noise for familiarity. He turned his back to reposition the meat, briefly exposing his shoulders and neck. In that instant, the distance closed. The lion launched forward in a short burst, covering several feet almost silently. The first impact knocked Leroux face first into the ground, breaking his collarbone from the force of the strike. Before he could react or roll away, the lion clamped onto the back of his neck. The bite was precise. The pressure crushed the cervical spine and tore a major artery. A nearby worker later reported hearing a single scream that cut off immediately. Drag marks showed the lion pulled the body roughly 20 feet, a normal feeding response. The animal fed briefly before staff arrived and fired warning shots, forcing it away from the body. Blood loss was severe, and Leroux showed no signs of movement when responders reached him. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived at the scene but were unable to provide treatment. Leroux was pronounced dead at the enclosure. An autopsy later confirmed the cause of death as a crushed cervical spine and arterial rupture. The injuries were consistent with a single neck bite. Trauma to the arms indicated a brief reflexive attempt to protect himself with no evidence of a prolonged struggle. Investigators found no equipment failure or gate malfunction. All safety systems were intact and functional. They concluded that none of the actions taken that morning were necessary to feed or manage the animal safely. The feeding chute had been installed after 2 earlier safety incidents involving close contact during hand feeding. Investigators determined its use was deliberately abandoned despite written warnings from staff. The lion was euthanized later that day. Authorities cited unsafe private ownership and repeated violations. The estate was shut down, and the land was later sold at a loss to a wildlife trust. Marcus Leroux believed familiarity made him safe. The next case shows the same mistake in a different setting, where one adjustment, not an animal, proved fatal. It was August 14, 2019, just after sunrise at a regional airport in northwestern Wyoming. The sky was clear, the winds were calm, and the mountains were visible across the valley. It was a perfect morning for flying. One small aircraft sat alone at the edge of the general aviation ramp. The plane did not look like a private jet. It was a lightweight single-engine aircraft assembled from an ultralight kit. Its frame was thin, its wings narrow, and its cockpit exposed compared to certified planes on the field. The aircraft belonged to Mark Ellison, 56 years old, a billionaire tech investor who had made his fortune decades earlier. Ellison owned multiple jets and flew commercially whenever he wanted, but he disliked standard aircraft. He believed they were overbuilt, overregulated, and slow to respond. Ellison had bought the kit 2 years earlier and assembled it himself in a private hangar. The manufacturer provided clear limits, strict weight tolerances, fixed control settings, and mandatory inspections by certified mechanics before flight. Ellison followed none of that fully. He enjoyed doing his own maintenance and believed his engineering background made outside oversight unnecessary. Ellison complained that the aircraft felt sluggish during turns. He told friends he wanted it to feel alive, closer to a glider than a plane. Without consulting the manufacturer, he adjusted the flight control linkage that connected the control stick to the wing's ailerons. He loosened a critical tension bolt to reduce resistance, believing it would make the plane more responsive. Maintenance notes found later showed the component was never meant to be adjusted. It was designed to remain rigid to prevent flutter under load. At 7:22 a.m., Ellison taxied onto the runway alone. There was no flight plan filed beyond a short local loop. Ground cameras recorded the aircraft accelerating normally. The takeoff roll was short. The plane lifted cleanly and began climbing. Within seconds of leaving the ground, witnesses noticed the aircraft wobble. Its left wing dipped, then corrected sharply. The movement was not smooth. It looked uneven, as if the plane was fighting itself. At approximately 300 feet above ground, the aircraft entered a shallow turn. That was when the loosened control linkage failed. Under aerodynamic load, the unsecured component allowed uncontrolled movement in the aileron system. The left wing experienced rapid oscillation, known as control flutter. The vibration intensified almost instantly. The wing twisted beyond its design limits. The structure did not bend gradually. It failed. The left wing collapsed inward at the root, tearing free from the frame. The aircraft rolled violently. With one wing gone, there was no lift and no chance of recovery. The plane inverted and fell nose first into open ground just beyond the airport boundary. The impact was catastrophic. Investigators later confirmed Ellison died instantly. The official cause of death was massive blunt force trauma sustained during the crash. The aircraft disintegrated on contact with the ground. There was no fire. The fuel load was small. The entire flight lasted less than 1 minute. The wreckage was scattered across a narrow area, consistent with a structural failure rather than a loss of control at speed. Examination showed no engine malfunction. The control surfaces on the remaining wing were intact. The failed linkage bolt was found loose in the debris field, showing clear signs of manual adjustment. The final report determined the crash was caused by improper modification of the flight control system. The aircraft met kit specifications before alteration, but a critical component was intentionally loosened against manufacturer guidance, allowing flutter and structural failure. Aviation officials noted the aircraft performed as physics dictated. Ellison ignored available expertise, choosing personal judgment over established safety limits. The last death happened in seconds after takeoff. The next unfolded more slowly, on calm water, driven by the same belief that experience and money could override basic safety limits. It was May 28, 2013, on a calm stretch of the Adriatic Sea off the Croatian coast. The water was flat, visibility was clear, and weather conditions were stable. The yacht was operating in open water under routine cruising conditions. Tomas Varga, 44, stood barefoot on the aft deck of his privately owned motor yacht, with invited investors, friends, and a small hired crew on board. After leaving shipping insurance, Varga began investing in luxury vessels, often saying his background gave him a better understanding of risk than designers or manufacturers. He frequently dismissed technical warnings as overly cautious. The yacht had recently been upgraded and was marketed as highly stable, with multiple sealed compartments. Manufacturer documentation stated that the ballast system was designed only for minor trim adjustments. It was not intended for intentional flooding beyond narrow limits. Varga disregarded those warnings. He believed controlled flooding would demonstrate the yacht's stability and presented the exercise as a legitimate test. Several guests recorded while the crew followed his instructions. Shortly after leaving shore, Varga ordered the lower ballast compartments opened. Seawater entered through valves meant to regulate balance gradually. At first, the vessel responded within normal limits. The hull settled slightly lower, and onboard systems continued operating normally. Varga insisted the design could tolerate the added load and instructed the crew to continue, despite visible listing. Within minutes, water intake exceeded the system's capacity. One ballast valve was left partially open during the procedure. Instead of distributing evenly, water continued entering a single compartment as the open valve was not corrected. The yacht began listing to starboard. Loose items slid across the deck. Varga moved toward the control area as the list increased. The angle worsened rapidly. The deck sloped sharply and footing became unstable. Attempts to counterbalance were ineffective due to the open valve. Investigators later determined that as the compartment filled beyond design limits, internal pressure forced water upward through access points. As the vessel rolled again, the movement became abrupt and uneven. Varga lost traction on the wet deck surface and was thrown sideways. He struck his head against a fixed steel mooring cleat bolted near the stern. The impact fractured his skull immediately. He collapsed at deck level near the stern as water continued moving across the surface. The yacht's list continued to increase. Seawater flowed onto the deck in repeated surges. Varga remained where he fell, incapacitated by the head injury and positioned against fixed deck hardware as the water level rose. He was not recovered before the deck submerged. The vessel reached a critical flooding state and could not be stabilized. All surviving passengers were removed from the yacht. Varga's body was recovered later after the vessel settled lower in the water. An autopsy determined the cause of death to be a fatal head injury with drowning as a contributing factor. Skull fractures were consistent with impact against a fixed metal object. Water found deep in the lungs confirmed drowning occurred after the injury. The yacht later sank fully and was marked as a navigation hazard until removal. Insurance claims were denied after investigators concluded the flooding resulted from deliberate owner-directed misuse of the ballast system. The incident was later referenced within marine insurance circles as an example of owner-directed actions overriding vessel design limits. Thomas Varga trusted that knowledge of risk made him immune to it. When the system failed, there was no margin left to recover. The next case brings that same confidence home, into a setting designed for comfort, not failure. Two more cases remain, each showing how extreme wealth led to dumb, preventable decisions with fatal consequences. Consider subscribing for more fatal files. It was June 12, 2016, in Scottsdale, Arizona. The heat hadn't broken even after sunset. In the backyard of a large gated home, tables were set up for a child's birthday party. Balloons were tied to chairs. Music played softly. At the center of the yard sat a glass-enclosed swimming pool, freshly cleaned and brightly lit. The homeowner was Evan Whitmore, 41 years old. He made good money in commercial real estate and liked to show that he understood how things worked. Friends said he trusted himself more than professionals and often bragged about cutting corners to save time and money. If something broke, he believed he could fix it better on his own. A few months earlier, Evan had modified the pool's heating system himself. He installed industrial inline heating elements directly into the return line and bypassed the temperature limiters, safety sensors, and shut down alarms designed to prevent overheating. He said the safeguards were unnecessary if monitored manually. He also altered the glass pool enclosure, removing the required internal emergency release to simplify wiring. Though it looked modern and secure, the enclosure no longer met residential safety code. As the party went on, children swam earlier in the evening, then got out to eat cake. By nightfall, only adults remained near the pool. Someone mentioned the water felt cooler than earlier. Evan walked over to the control panel and turned the heat higher, saying he'd bring the temperature up quickly. Without working safety controls, the heating elements continued running at full output, superheating water as it circulated back into the pool. The water temperature continued rising beyond safe swimming limits, particularly near the return outlets where superheated water entered the pool. No alarms sounded, no breakers tripped. The system kept running without interruption. Evan decided to get in himself to test it. He opened the enclosure, stepped inside, and climbed down the ladder. Witnesses said he reacted quickly after entering. He stiffened, stood upright in the water, and appeared disoriented. The water was dangerously hot, forcing his body into immediate strain. Within minutes, the heat began overwhelming his system. His heart rate and breathing increased sharply. The sudden exposure to overheated water rapidly overwhelmed his body, impairing balance and judgment. He tried to climb back out, but his grip slipped on the rails. His movements became uncoordinated and uneven. At first, people outside the enclosure thought he was joking or exaggerating. Then, they saw him shouting and striking the glass. His steps faltered. He staggered, lost his footing, and went under. He surfaced briefly, gasping and confused, then sank again. This time, he did not resurface. Guests rushed toward the enclosure but were unable to open it from the outside. The locking mechanism remained engaged, and there was no internal emergency release. Emergency services were contacted while multiple attempts were made to force the doors and strike the glass with patio furniture, but the panels did not fail immediately. Heat and steam quickly built up inside the enclosure, further limiting visibility and making entry unsafe. When firefighters arrived, they forced the enclosure open. Equipment readings and later measurements confirmed the water temperature was dangerously high. Evan was pulled from the pool unconscious. Paramedics began treatment immediately, but resuscitation efforts failed. He was pronounced dead shortly after. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as hyperthermia complicated by drowning. His core body temperature was critically elevated, and water was found in his lungs, confirming he was alive when he went under. Doctors concluded that extreme heat exposure caused rapid loss of coordination and decision-making ability, leading to drowning. Investigators found no defect in the pool structure itself. The heating system had been intentionally altered. Temperature limiters were bypassed, safety sensors disconnected, and alarms disabled. The enclosure lacked a required internal emergency release due to homeowner modification and non-code installation. After Evan's death, inspectors reviewed his other properties and found similar safety changes. His company shut down within months. Lawsuits drained his estate, and the house was eventually sold. Evan Whitmore believed safety limits didn't apply once he rebuilt the system himself. That belief carried consequences beyond machinery. The final case shows what happens when control is assumed over something that was never designed to be controlled at all. It was September 3rd, 2015, just after noon, on a large ranch outside a small town in central Texas. The property stretched across thousands of acres of dry land and pasture, surrounded by tall fencing and watched by security cameras. It was run as a private wildlife park, advertised to wealthy donors as an educational safari experience. Harold Jensen was 58 years old. He had made his money selling cattle feed, then grew it further by buying land during a local development boom. Over time, the ranch stopped being just a personal getaway and turned into a showpiece. Jensen brought in exotic animals and promoted the place as conservation-focused. Among them were several adult elephants kept in a wide enclosure built on land that once held cattle. The elephants were legally acquired, but the ranch did not employ certified elephant handlers or a veterinarian trained to manage animals that large. Jensen often entered animal enclosures himself. Staff members warned him repeatedly that the elephants were becoming more restless due to seasonal behavior changes. Those warnings were written down but ignored. Jensen insisted the elephants knew him and that close contact was safe. That day, Jensen was hosting a small tour for guests. Several people recorded with their phones as he demonstrated how he used a camera drone to film the animals. He explained that aerial footage helped attract donors and investors. Despite staff objections, Jensen entered the elephant enclosure to get ground-level shots while the drone flew above. About 20 minutes into the demonstration, Jensen decided to push the filming closer. He lowered the drone to get tighter shots and began walking toward the elephants at the same time, trying to guide it by hand. The animals were already alert, watching both the machine and Jensen's movement. The drone suddenly clipped a perimeter-mounted support line attached to the enclosure fencing. It spun hard, dropped straight down, and slammed into the dirt. The impact was loud and sharp. One of the propellers shattered. The motors continued running, grinding against the ground and throwing up dust while producing a high-pitched, irregular noise. The sound triggered an immediate reaction. The elephants stiffened, spread their ears, and bunched together. One of them trumpeted briefly. The noise from the drone didn't stop. It skipped and rattled as the motors fought against broken blades. Instead of backing away, Jensen moved toward the fallen drone, waving his arm as if to signal calm. The herd's behavior shifted from alert monitoring to defensive response within seconds. One adult elephant broke formation and charged. The animal struck Jensen from behind before he could react. He was lifted off his feet and thrown forward. He hit the ground face down and did not get back up. The elephant stepped down onto his upper back, pinning him to the ground and causing catastrophic chest injuries. As the herd reacted, more elephants moved through the same area, stepping where he lay. As the herd moved through the area, additional impacts compounded the injuries. Investigators later noted the animal's movement was driven by confusion and stress rather than directed aggression. Within seconds, Jensen stopped moving. He showed no signs of movement as the injuries proved fatal. Handlers outside the enclosure tried to drive the elephants away using noise and vehicles. By the time the animals were pushed back, Jensen was completely still. Emergency services were called, but no one attempted first aid inside the enclosure because it was too dangerous. An autopsy later showed Jensen died within seconds. The cause of death was massive blunt force trauma and crushing injuries to the chest. Both lungs collapsed, his heart ruptured from the pressure, multiple ribs were broken, and internal bleeding was severe. Medical examiners concluded death occurred within seconds due to massive blunt force trauma. After the incident, authorities shut down the ranch. The elephants were removed under state supervision. Guests' phones and cameras were collected as evidence, and recordings were kept by investigators. No criminal charges were filed, but regulators cited repeated safety violations and unauthorized access to animal enclosures. Jensen's ranch became a case study in debates over private ownership of exotic animals. In the months that followed, regulators increased oversight of the facility, and the elephants were removed under coordinated authority review. The ranch never reopened. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos.